and a deep sense of purpose. Rebekah's actions, driven by faith and sometimes fraught with complexity, leave a lasting impact on the destiny of Israel's future. Rebekah was born into the family of Bethuel, who was a descendant of Nahor, the brother of Abraham. This connection to Abraham's family positioned Rebekah within the lineage that would eventually carry forward God's covenant promise. Rebekah lived in Paddan Aram, in the land of Mesopotamia, far from the land of Canaan, where Abraham and his son Isaac resided. Rebekah's early life is not described in great detail, but her character is introduced through the account of a divine encounter at a well, a setting that was often a place of significant meetings in biblical times. She was a woman of beauty, as the text later implies, but more importantly, she exhibited a remarkable spirit of hospitality and kindness, qualities that would shape her role in the unfolding events. Abraham, nearing the end of his life, was deeply concerned about securing a suitable wife for his son Isaac. The covenant God made with Abraham promised that his descendants would become a great nation, but this future rested on Isaac marrying a woman who would share in that promise. Abraham, determined to ensure that Isaac would not marry a Canaanite woman, sent his chief servant on a crucial mission to find a wife for Isaac from his own family in Mesopotamia. The servant, unnamed but trusted with such a significant task, traveled a great distance, carrying with him not only the hopes of Abraham, but also a deep reliance on God's guidance. Upon arriving at a well outside the city of Nahor, the servant prayed earnestly for a sign. His prayer was specific. The woman who offered him water and also offered to draw water for his camels would be the one chosen by God for Isaac. This prayer underscored the importance of divine direction in the life of Abraham's family, especially as they awaited the fulfillment of God's promises. The servant did not trust in his own wisdom, but instead sought God's intervention, knowing that the future of Abraham's lineage was at stake. At that very moment, Rebekah appeared at the well, carrying her water jar. The Bible describes her as a young woman of marriageable age, and her approach to the well marked the beginning of a pivotal moment in her life. When the servant asked for a drink, Rebekah not only complied but also, without being asked, offered to draw water for the camels. This was no small gesture. Watering a group of camels required considerable effort, showcasing her generosity and industrious nature. The servant, astonished at the rapid answer to his prayer, watched in silence, waiting to see if the Lord had indeed led him to the right woman. When Rebekah finished watering the camels, the servant presented her with gifts of gold, a nose ring and bracelets, symbols of his intent to secure her as Isaac's wife. Rebekah's humility and grace in accepting these gifts further reflected her suitability as a bride for the heir of Abraham's covenant. #Rebekah's family and God's plan. After speaking with Rebekah, the servant was invited to her family's home, where he met her brother Laban and her father Bethuel. In recounting his mission and how God had answered his prayer, the servant emphasized the divine nature of his task. The family, recognizing the hand of God in these events, agreed that the marriage was from the Lord and gave their consent. Rebekah, upon hearing the proposal, showed no hesitation. Despite the suddenness of the situation and the fact that it meant leaving her family and homeland behind, she demonstrated a remarkable faith in God's plan. Her willingness to depart immediately, without delay, signified her trust in the future God had laid out for her. When the servant asked if she would go with him to marry Isaac, Rebekah simply replied, "I will go." This response mirrors the faith of Abraham, who also left his homeland in obedience to God's call. Rebekah's journey to Canaan marked her own leap of faith, as she embraced an unknown future with courage. Rebekah's arrival in Canaan was met with joy. When she saw Isaac from a distance, she modestly covered herself with a veil, a traditional sign of respect and purity in anticipation of marriage. The Bible describes Isaac's immediate affection for Rebekah, stating that he loved her deeply, and she became a source of comfort to him after the death of his mother, Sarah. Their marriage was characterized by mutual respect and love, and Rebekah took her place as the matriarch of the household. However, like many of the patriarchal couples, Isaac and Rebekah faced a significant challenge. Rebekah was barren. This echoed the struggles of Sarah, Abraham's wife, who also experienced infertility before the miraculous birth of Isaac. Isaac, however, did not lose faith. He prayed fervently for Rebekah, entreating the Lord to grant them children. God answered Isaac's prayer, and after 20 years of marriage, Rebekah conceived. Her pregnancy, however, was far from ordinary. As Rebekah's pregnancy progressed, she felt an unusual and intense struggle within her womb. Concerned, she sought the Lord to understand what was happening. God's response was profound. "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." Genesis 25 verse 23. This prophecy foretold the future rivalry between Rebekah's sons, Esau and Jacob, and the eventual dominance of Jacob's descendants. The Lord revealed that Jacob, though the younger son, would carry forward the covenant promise, a reversal of the traditional cultural expectation that the firstborn would inherit the father's blessing. Rebekah's understanding of this prophecy influenced many of her future decisions. The knowledge that Jacob was chosen by God shaped her actions as she navigated the complexities of family dynamics and the fulfillment of God's promise. When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, she delivered twin boys. Esau, the firstborn, emerged covered in red hair, a distinctive feature that would later be associated with his rugged, outdoorsman lifestyle. Jacob, the secondborn, followed closely behind, grasping Esau's heel as he was born. This unusual birth foreshadowed the rivalry that would define their relationship throughout their lives. Esau grew up to be a skilled hunter, a man of the field who thrived in the wilderness. Jacob, by contrast, was described as a quiet man who preferred to stay among the tents, engaging in domestic affairs. These differences in personality were mirrored in the favoritism shown by their parents. Isaac favored Esau for his strength and hunting skills, while Rebekah favored Jacob, likely because of her knowledge of God's prophecy about his future. As the boys grew older, the tension between them increased, particularly regarding their father's blessing. In ancient times, the blessing of the father was a formal passing of authority and inheritance, usually given to the firstborn. Isaac, now old and nearly blind, planned to give his blessing to Esau, unaware that God had chosen Jacob. Rebekah, remembering the prophecy, took matters into her own hands. When she overheard Isaac instructing Esau to prepare a meal before receiving the blessing, Rebekah devised a plan to ensure that Jacob would receive it instead. She instructed Jacob to deceive his father by pretending to be Esau. This involved preparing a meal for Isaac and disguising Jacob with Esau's clothing and animal skins to mimic Esau's hairy arms. Jacob, initially hesitant, eventually agreed to his mother's plan. Together, they carried out the deception, and Isaac, deceived by Jacob's disguise, gave him the blessing intended for Esau. This blessing included the promise of prosperity and dominion, affirming Jacob as the heir to God's covenant with Abraham. When Esau returned and discovered what had happened, he was devastated. He begged Isaac for a blessing, but it was too late. The primary blessing had already been given to Jacob. Though Isaac did bless Esau, it was clear that Jacob would have a position of greater power and authority. Esau's anger turned to hatred, and he vowed to kill Jacob after Isaac's death. Rebekah, realizing the danger Jacob was in, once again took decisive action. She advised Jacob to flee to her brother Laban in Haran, both to escape Esau's wrath and to find a wife from among their kin, as marrying a Canaanite woman was not acceptable in their family. Rebekah's final significant act in the biblical narrative was to ensure Jacob's safety and his adherence to the family's tradition of marrying within their own people. She convinced Isaac to send Jacob away, framing her concern around the prospect of Jacob marrying a Canaanite woman, as Esau had done. This strategy worked, and Isaac sent Jacob to Haran with his blessing, unknowingly reaffirming God's plan for Jacob to inherit the promise. Rebekah's story ends here in the biblical text, but her influence is felt long after. Jacob's journey to Haran, his marriages, and the eventual birth of his 12 sons, all central figures in the formation of the 12 tribes of Israel, are direct outcomes of Rebekah's actions. Her faith, though at times expressed through manipulation and deception, ultimately aligned with God's will for the future of his people. Rebekah's life is a tapestry of faith, courage, and complexity. She is a woman who, like many biblical figures, was deeply flawed yet used by God to fulfill his divine purposes. Her faith in God's plan was evident from the moment she left her family to marry Isaac. and it remained steadfast as she navigated the difficult choices that came with being a mother and matriarch. Her role in securing Jacob's place as the heir to Isaac's blessing highlights the tension between human free will and divine sovereignty. Though her methods were questionable, the outcome was in accordance with God's will, demonstrating that God can work through the imperfect actions of his people to bring about his plans. Rebekah's story serves as a reminder of the importance of faith and the complexity of family dynamics in the unfolding of God's promises. Through her, we see a picture of a woman deeply committed to the future of her family, willing to take bold and sometimes risky steps to ensure that God's purposes would be fulfilled. In the end, Rebekah's legacy is carried forward not only in her son Jacob, who became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, but also in the lessons her story imparts about the intersection of faith, family, and divine destiny.